What if I told you that a 13-year-old girl disappeared in broad daylight, and the only clue left behind was a single frame captured by a security camera showing her walking toward something, or someone, that would change everything? A frame so haunting that even seasoned detectives couldn't sleep after seeing it. This is the story of Emily Smith, a girl from Kansas City who vanished on a Tuesday afternoon in March 2012, and the desperate search that led her father to an abandoned cabin 62 miles away, where the truth was more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Before we dive in, let me ask you, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Now, let's go back to that spring day in Kansas City, Missouri, when everything changed for the Smith family. Kansas City in 2012 was a city of contrasts. The Plaza District gleamed with upscale shops and fountains, while neighborhoods like the one where the Smiths lived, near Troost Avenue, struggled with aging infrastructure and rising crime rates. The Smith family lived in a modest two-story house on a quiet street lined with oak trees that were just beginning to bud. March in Kansas City meant unpredictable weather. One day you'd have sunshine and 60 degrees, the next you'd wake up to snow. That Tuesday, March 13th, started with clear skies and a temperature that climbed to 58 degrees by noon. Emily Smith was an 8th grader at Central Middle School, a red brick building built in the 1960s that served about 400 students. She was an average student, not the type to get into trouble, not the type to stand out in a crowd. Brown hair that fell just past her shoulders, hazel eyes, 5'2", barely 90 pounds. She loved art class and spent most of her free time drawing in a sketchbook she carried everywhere. Her father, Robert Smith, worked as a mechanic at a shop on Independence Avenue. Her mother, Linda, had passed away from cancer 2 years earlier, leaving Robert to raise Emily and her younger brother, Jake, who was 9, on his own. That morning was like any other morning. Robert made scrambled eggs and toast. Emily ate quickly, barely speaking, the way teenagers do. She grabbed her backpack, her sketchbook, and her phone, a basic flip phone because Robert couldn't afford a smartphone. She left the house at 7:45 to catch the bus at the corner of their street. Robert watched her walk down the sidewalk, her purple jacket bright against the gray morning. He waved. She didn't wave back. He would replay that moment in his mind thousands of times in the days that followed, wishing he had called out to her, wishing he had said something more than just goodbye. School ended at 3:15. Emily usually took the bus home, arriving around 3:45. But that day, she never got on the bus. The bus driver, a woman named Carol Henderson who had been driving that route for 12 years, remembered waiting an extra 5 minutes, looking for Emily, but she never showed up. Carol assumed Emily had stayed after school for an activity or gotten a ride with a friend. She didn't report it. Why would she? Kids miss the bus all the time. By 4:30, Robert started to worry. Emily always called if she was going to be late. He tried her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. He called the school. The office was closed. He called Emily's 2 closest friends, Sarah and Amanda. Neither had seen her after school. Sarah said Emily had been in art class during the last period but left as soon as the bell rang. Amanda said Emily had seemed quiet that day, quieter than usual, but hadn't mentioned any plans. At 5 o'clock, Robert called the Kansas City Police Department. The dispatcher took his information but explained that a person had to be missing for 24 hours before they could officially file a report, unless there were signs of foul play or the missing person was considered high risk. A 13-year-old girl missing for 2 hours didn't qualify yet. Robert felt his chest tighten. He knew something was wrong. Call it a father's instinct, call it gut feeling, but he knew. He got in his truck, a battered Ford F-150, and started driving. He went to the school first. The parking lot was empty except for a janitor's car. He checked the playground, the athletic fields behind the school. Nothing. He drove to the library on 31st Street, a place Emily sometimes went to check out books. Closed. He drove to the Quick Trip gas station where Emily sometimes stopped to buy candy. The clerk, a young guy with tattoos on his arms, said he hadn't seen her. Now, here's where things get strange. At 6:20 that evening, Robert got a call from a detective named Marcus Hayes. Detective Hayes explained that they had reviewed security footage from cameras near the school and found something. He asked Robert to come to the station immediately. When Robert arrived at the East Patrol Division station on Prospect Avenue, He was led into a small room with a television and a DVD player. Detective Hayes was a tall man, maybe 6'4", with graying hair and tired eyes. He had been with the KCPD for 19 years and had worked dozens of missing persons cases. He pressed play on the remote. The footage was grainy, black and white, timestamp showing March 13, 2012, 3:22 p.m. The camera was mounted on the corner of a building across from Central Middle School, pointing at the intersection of Linwood Boulevard and Woodland Avenue. Students poured out of the school, clusters of kids walking in different directions, getting into cars, boarding buses. Then, there she was. Emily Smith, purple jacket, backpack over one shoulder, walking south on Woodland Avenue, away from the bus stop. She was alone. She walked with purpose, not looking around, not hesitating. After about 30 seconds, a dark-colored van, possibly blue or black, pulled up beside her. The footage was too grainy to see the license plate or any identifying marks on the van. Emily stopped. She turned toward the van. The side door slid open. And then, Emily Smith got into the van. Not dragged. Not forced. She got in willingly. Robert felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. He watched the footage 3 more times. Each time, the same thing. Emily walking, the van pulling up, Emily getting in. The van drove away, heading south on Woodland, and disappeared from the camera's view. Detective Hayes paused the video. He looked at Robert and asked the question that would haunt this case for the next 48 hours. Did Emily know the person in that van? Let me ask you something. If you were a parent watching that footage, what would be going through your mind right now? Would you think your child was running away? Would you think she was meeting someone she met online? Would you think she was being manipulated by someone she trusted? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this is where the investigation took a turn that nobody expected. Detective Hayes began working the case like any abduction. He pulled phone records. Emily's flip phone had been turned off at 3:25 p.m., just 3 minutes after she got into the van. The last call she made was to her father that morning. No text messages, no unusual calls in the days leading up to her disappearance. Hayes interviewed Emily's friends again, this time at the station with their parents present. Sarah Martinez, Emily's best friend since 4th grade, broke down crying. She admitted that Emily had been acting strange for the past 2 weeks. Emily had mentioned meeting someone, a person she described as understanding her, someone who listened. Sarah didn't know who this person was. Emily had been secretive about it. Amanda Chen, Emily's other close friend, confirmed the same thing. Emily had been withdrawn, spending less time with them, spending more time on the computer in the school library. Hayes obtained a warrant to search Emily's room. What they found was disturbing. Hidden under her mattress was a notebook, not her usual sketchbook, but a spiral notebook filled with writings. Page after page of Emily expressing feelings of loneliness, sadness about her mother's death, feeling misunderstood by her father. And scattered throughout the notebook were references to someone named David. David says I'm special. David understands what I'm going through. David says we can be happy together. There was no last name, no phone number, no address. Just David. Hayes immediately suspected online predation. He obtained another warrant, this time for the Smith family's computer. The forensics team found that Emily had been using a chat room on a website popular with teenagers in the early 2000s. The chat log showed conversations between Emily and a user named David KC72. The conversations started innocently enough, talking about art, music, school. But they quickly became more personal. David KC72 asked about Emily's family, her feelings, her problems. He was sympathetic, supportive. He told her she was mature for her age. He told her she deserved better than the life she had. And then, he started talking about meeting in person. The forensics team traced the IP address of David KC72. It led to a public library in Independence, Missouri, a city about 10 miles east of Kansas City. Hayes sent officers to the library, but by the time they arrived, it was clear that whoever was using that computer had been careful. The library had dozens of computers available for public use, no login required. The staff couldn't remember anyone specific using the computers around the times of the chat sessions. It was a dead end. Robert Smith was falling apart. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He spent every waking hour driving around Kansas City, putting up flyers with Emily's picture, asking anyone and everyone if they had seen her. Local news stations picked up the story. Emily's face was on television, in newspapers, on social media. Tips started coming in. Someone saw a girl matching Emily's description at a gas station in Lawrence, Kansas. Someone else saw her at a Walmart in Lee's Summit. Every tip was investigated. Every tip led nowhere. 3 days after Emily disappeared, Detective Hayes received a call that changed everything. A woman named Patricia Donovan, who lived in a rural area about 40 miles south of Kansas City near the town of Harrisonville, called to report something strange. She had seen a dark blue van parked on an old access road near her property. The van had been there for 2 days. She thought it was suspicious because nobody ever used that road. It led to an area of abandoned farmland and old hunting cabins that hadn't been occupied in years. Hayes and 2 other officers drove out immediately. They found the van exactly where Patricia described. It was a 1997 Dodge Caravan, dark blue, license plates removed. The van was unlocked. Inside, they found Emily's backpack, her sketchbook, and her flip phone, the battery removed. There were also fast food wrappers, empty water bottles, and a road map of Missouri with several areas circled in pen. One of the circled areas was near Harrisonville. Another was near the town of Butler, about 60 miles south. A third was near Montrose, even further south, almost to the Kansas border. The discovery of the van sent the investigation into overdrive. Hayes called in the FBI. This was now officially a kidnapping case. Search teams were organized. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras flew over the circled areas on the map. Ground teams with search dogs combed through fields and woods. Local volunteers joined the search, hundreds of people walking in lines through overgrown properties and wooded areas. Robert Smith was with them every day, barely stopping to rest. Here's a question for you. If you were leading this investigation, which area would you search first? The one closest to where the van was found, or the ones further away? Think about it. A kidnapper wants to avoid being caught. Would he stay close, or would he go as far as possible? Let me know what you think in the comments. Detective Hayes made a decision. He focused the search on the area near Montrose, the furthest point circled on the map. His reasoning was that if the kidnapper was smart enough to remove the license plates and disable Emily's phone, he was smart enough to know that investigators would find the van eventually. He would want maximum distance between the van and his hiding place. Search teams descended on Montrose, a tiny town with a population of barely 200 people. The area was rural, mostly farmland and patches of thick woods. There were several old properties, abandoned homesteads from families who had left decades ago. Meanwhile, Robert Smith couldn't shake a feeling. He kept looking at that map, at the circle near Butler. It was about 62 miles from Kansas City, in Bates County. He remembered that area. Years ago, before Linda got sick, they had gone on a camping trip near Montrose Lake, which was close to Butler. They had driven past several old cabins on the way, cabins that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Robert mentioned this to Detective Hayes, but Hayes was focused on Montrose. The teams were already there. The search was underway. Hayes told Robert to let them do their job. But Robert couldn't wait. On the 5th day after Emily disappeared, March 18th, Robert got in his truck at 4 in the morning and drove south on Highway 71 toward Butler. The sun was just starting to rise when he reached the area. He turned off the highway onto a series of county roads, dirt roads that wound through fields and patches of forest. He drove slowly, looking for anything that seemed out of place. He passed farmhouses, barns, silos. Everything looked quiet, normal. He was about to turn around when he saw it. A narrow gravel road, barely visible, overgrown with weeds, branching off from the county road. There was a rusted metal gate, hanging open. Robert turned onto the gravel road. His truck bounced over ruts and potholes. The road went on for about half a mile, winding through trees, before opening into a small clearing. And there, at the edge of the clearing, was a cabin. The cabin was small, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet, made of dark wood that had weathered to almost black. The windows were covered with boards. The roof sagged in the middle. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Robert stopped his truck. His heart was pounding. He reached for his phone to call Detective Hayes, but there was no signal. He was too far out in the middle of nowhere. He sat in his truck for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Every instinct told him to turn around, drive back to where he had signal, and call for help. But another instinct, that same father's instinct that had told him something was wrong on the day Emily disappeared, told him he couldn't wait. He got out of the truck. The morning air was cold. Robert walked toward the cabin. The ground was soft, muddy from recent rain. He could see tire tracks, fresh ones, leading up to the cabin and then back out toward the road. Someone had been here recently. He walked up to the front door. It was closed but not locked. He pushed it open. The hinges creaked. The smell hit him immediately, a combination of mildew, rotting wood, and something else, something chemical. He stepped inside. The cabin was dark, the only light coming through cracks in the boarded windows. As his eyes adjusted, he could see a small room with a wood stove in one corner, a table, 2 chairs, and a doorway leading to another room in the back. Robert called out, "Emily." His voice sounded too loud in the silence. No answer. He walked toward the back room. The door was closed. He opened it, and there she was. Emily Smith, sitting on a mattress on the floor, her hands bound with duct tape, her mouth gagged. She was alive. Her eyes went wide when she saw her father. Robert rushed to her, pulling the gag from her mouth, tearing at the tape on her wrists. Emily was crying, shaking. Robert held her, telling her she was safe, that he found her, that it was over. But it wasn't over yet. Behind him, Robert heard a sound. He turned. A man was standing in the doorway, blocking the exit. The man was in his 40s, average height, thinning hair, wearing dirty jeans and a flannel shirt. He was holding something in his hand. A knife. The man looked at Robert and said, very calmly, "You shouldn't be here." Robert positioned himself between the man and Emily. He asked the man his name. The man said David. David Coleman. He lived in Independence, worked at a factory, had been divorced for 5 years. He said he met Emily online, that they had a connection, that she wanted to come with him, that she understood him. He said they were going to start a new life together. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was describing the weather. Robert felt rage rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He told David that Emily was a child, that this was kidnapping, that the police were looking for him. David shook his head. He said nobody would understand. He said society was broken, that people like him and Emily were special, that they deserved to be happy. He took a step forward, still holding the knife. Robert knew he had to do something. He looked around the room. There was a piece of wood, part of an old chair, on the floor near his feet. In one quick motion, Robert grabbed the wood and swung it at David. It connected with David's arm, and the knife fell to the floor. David lunged for it, but Robert was faster. He kicked the knife across the room and tackled David, pinning him to the ground. What happened next was a blur. Emily ran out of the cabin. Robert held David down, using all his strength. David struggled, screaming, saying incoherent things. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few minutes, Robert heard voices outside. Police officers rushed into the cabin. Detective Hayes was there. They pulled Robert off of David and handcuffed David Coleman. Robert stood up, breathing hard, his hands shaking. Hayes asked if he was okay. Robert nodded. He asked where Emily was. Hayes pointed outside. Emily was sitting in a police car, wrapped in a blanket, talking to a female officer. It turned out that when Robert didn't answer his phone that morning, Detective Hayes had checked with Robert's neighbors and learned that Robert had left early, heading south. Hayes figured out where Robert was going and sent units to the Butler area. They had found Robert's truck on the gravel road and followed it to the cabin, arriving just minutes after the confrontation inside. David Coleman was arrested and charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, and attempted assault. His trial took place 8 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. The chat logs, the security footage, Emily's testimony, the cabin, everything. Coleman was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for at least 25 years. During the trial, details emerged about Coleman's past. He had been fired from several jobs for inappropriate behavior around female co-workers. He had been reported to police twice for following teenage girls, but no charges had been filed due to lack of evidence. He had a history of creating fake online profiles to talk to young girls. Emily Smith had been his fourth victim. 3 other girls had been contacted by him online, but they had stopped responding before he could arrange meetings. Emily spent weeks in therapy after her rescue. She struggled with nightmares, anxiety, fear of being alone. But slowly, with support from her father, her brother, her friends, and professional counselors, she began to heal. She returned to school the following fall. She graduated high school in 2016 and went on to study psychology in college, hoping to help other victims of predators. Robert Smith became an advocate for online safety, speaking at schools and community centers about the dangers of online predation and the warning signs parents should look for. Now, let me ask you this. What do you think was the turning point in this case? Was it the security camera footage? Was it finding the van? Was it Robert's refusal to give up? Or was it something else? Think about it and share your answer in the comments, because the truth is, this case had multiple turning points, but the biggest one was a father's love and determination. Looking back at the case, several things stand out. First, the importance of that security camera footage. Without it, investigators would have had no idea that Emily got into a vehicle willingly, which completely changed the direction of the investigation. Second, the notebook under Emily's mattress. It provided crucial evidence of online grooming and gave investigators a name to look for. Third, Patricia Donovan's phone call about the abandoned van. That discovery narrowed the search area and provided physical evidence linking Coleman to the crime. Fourth, the road map with circled areas. While it could have been a red herring, it gave search teams specific locations to focus on. And finally, Robert Smith's intuition and bravery. Against advice, he followed his gut feeling, found the cabin, and rescued his daughter. But there's a bigger lesson here, something that goes beyond the specifics of this case. Emily Smith was a normal kid from a normal family who got caught in the web of a predator. She wasn't naive, she wasn't reckless. She was grieving the loss of her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood, and a predator exploited those vulnerabilities. David Coleman spent weeks building trust with Emily, making her feel special, making her believe he was the only person who truly understood her. By the time he asked her to meet him, she trusted him completely. That's how predators work. They don't snatch kids off the street. They groom them, manipulate them, make them feel like the meeting is their idea. The statistics are terrifying. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, 1 in 7 children between the ages of 10 and 17 have received unwanted sexual solicitation online. 1 in 5 have been exposed to unwanted sexual material. Many of these children never tell their parents because they feel ashamed or because the predator has convinced them that nobody will understand. In Emily's case, she felt isolated after her mother's death. She felt like her father didn't have time for her because he was working long hours to support the family. Coleman picked up on those feelings and used them against her. So what can we learn from Emily's story? First, communication is crucial. Parents need to have open, honest conversations with their children about online safety. Not just one conversation, but ongoing discussions. Children need to know that they can come to their parents if something online makes them uncomfortable, without fear of punishment or judgment. Second, monitoring is important. Parents should know what websites their children are visiting, who they're talking to, what they're sharing. This doesn't mean invading privacy in a way that damages trust, but it does mean staying informed and involved. Third, warning signs matter. If a child becomes withdrawn, secretive, or starts acting differently, parents need to pay attention and ask questions. Fourth, trust your instincts. Robert Smith knew something was wrong when Emily didn't come home. He didn't wait for official timelines or protocols. He took action. That instinct saved his daughter's life. Emily Smith is now 35 years old. In a 2020 interview, more than 10 years after her rescue, she spoke publicly about her experience for the first time. She said that the hardest part wasn't the 5 days she spent in that cabin. The hardest part was forgiving herself for getting into that van. She carried guilt for years, feeling like she had been stupid, like she should have known better. Through therapy, she learned that she wasn't stupid. She was a child who was manipulated by an adult predator. The guilt wasn't hers to carry. She also spoke about her father. She said that the moment she saw him walk through that cabin door was the moment she knew everything would be okay. She said her father was her hero, not just because he found her, but because in the months and years after her rescue, he never made her feel ashamed or blamed. He supported her, listened to her, and helped her rebuild her life. Robert Smith passed away in 2021 from a heart attack. At his funeral, Emily spoke about her father's legacy. She said he taught her that love means never giving up, even when the world tells you to stop looking, even when the odds seem impossible. She said that every person she helps in her work as a trauma counselor is a tribute to her father's determination and love. Think about that for a moment. A 13-year-old girl disappeared in Kansas City. A father refused to give up. A predator was stopped. A life was saved. And now, years later, that same girl is saving other lives. That's the power of resilience, the power of love, the power of refusing to accept defeat. Before we end, I want to ask you one more time. Where are you watching this from? And have you ever had an experience where your instincts told you something was wrong? Share your story in the comments. Your story might help someone else. The case of Emily Smith is a reminder that evil exists, but so does courage. Predators like David Coleman are out there, using the internet to find vulnerable children. But there are also people like Robert Smith, people who will do whatever it takes to protect the ones they love. And there are survivors like Emily, people who refuse to let their past define their future. If you take one thing away from this story, let it be this: pay attention to the people you love. Notice when they're struggling. Ask questions. Listen. Be present. Because sometimes, the difference between tragedy and hope is simply someone who cares enough to look, someone who refuses to give up, someone who will drive 62 miles into the middle of nowhere on nothing but a gut feeling and a father's love. Emily Smith's last words in that 2020 interview stayed with me. She said, "I was lost, but I was found. I was broken, but I healed. I was a victim, but I became a survivor. And now, I'm a voice for those who can't speak yet. My father gave me my life back twice. Once when I was born, and once when he walked through that cabin door. I live every day trying to honor that gift. If you're out there and you're hurting, if you're in danger, if you feel lost, please know this. Someone is looking for you. Someone cares. Don't give up. Hold on. Help is coming." That's the story of Emily Smith, the girl who disappeared on a Tuesday afternoon in March 2012 and was found 5 days later in an abandoned cabin 62 miles from home. The girl who was saved by her father's love and refusal to give up. The girl who turned her trauma into purpose and her pain into power. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please share it. You never know who might need to hear it. And if you're a parent, hug your children tonight. Tell them you love them. Listen to them. Because in this world, that might be the most important thing you ever do. Stay safe out there. And remember, even in the darkest moments, there's always hope. Always.